Hey, there we are. Okay, we're live. Hey guys, it's Ray here, the gray-haired guy in a gi. And today I have an absolute special guest for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, martial arts, Mike. Mike, to get your last name pronounced correctly, it's a Kitson.
No, it's Kitson, Kitson.
Thank you
It's an
very
English
much. I
name. Yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah.
Great. So yeah, we have Mike here. Mike is like he's young, but he's old. He's old school martial arts guy. So this is going to be fantastic. I love history. I love the history of martial arts, history, especially Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I know a fair amount about it, but this guy knows way more than me, and I got lots to ask. So first, how you doing?
I'm great, Ray. We were in the garden, getting some stuff out of the garden this afternoon and hanging around and not doing too much. I'm not working today, so
Oh, okay, good, good.
yeah, yeah.
Right on. Well, these
No classes today.
that's perfect. These podcasts are video things. They're very casual, and you know, obviously a lot of people will watch it, so you can feel free to say whatever you want. We don't curse and swear too much on it, but
Oh no,
anyway.
I'm good with that. I don't. I probably there's some of my kids watching this, so I won't be cursing too much.
Okay, that's perfect. So this we
Yeah.
won't. We'll keep it anyway. So first, I want to start immediately. I like to say the plugs. Tell me what you're doing right now as far as martial arts. Where your school's at, what you're doing. Give me the lowdown like a good salesman.
Um, my business is the Sandbox Henzo Gracie Academy in New Glasgow. I'm conjoined with Dukes Up Boxing with Dukas Davis and Tommy Davis, who are longstanding boxers and coaches in Nova Scotia for a very long time. And we run a business at 110 Provost Street in New Glasgow, not North Provost. Don't put that in. It's Provost Street, and we're right downtown. And yeah, we were just out of an old bargain basement that used to be a Zeller's back in the 70s and early
Wow.
80s. And yeah,
And where exactly again? You're
it's
located
downtown New Glasgow,
down in New
110 Provo
Glasgow.
Street, New Glasgow. Yeah,
Okay. What
yeah.
do you have New Glasgow wise as far as martial arts besides yourself?
Well,
Regular stuff?
there's quite a few. Oh, there's lots of there's a karate club there in Trenton, and I believe there's one still in New Glasgow.
Okay.
And there was Taekwondo here. There's a boxing gym in Trenton, one in Westville, one in New Glasgow. We have three boxing gyms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and another guy, Brody Blair, is kind of on the fence whether he's going to do stuff or not. But there'd be another one. He teaches more fitness boxing. But yeah, also there's Pictou County Jiu Jitsu
Yep.
with Jared McIntosh and Jason Rorson. And then there's two places in Pictou. They're both the same spot, but they have different names. There's Little Lobsters, which is Derek Clark's um, jiu-jitsu school for his for kids, and
Okay.
then he
Wonderful.
has Shiretown Jiu-Jitsu, which is adults.
Right. Little Lobsters. That's a great name. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. I like
That,
that.
that is
Yeah,
good. That is good.
yeah. We also have
So,
Kano Kai Judo Club, which is a
yes.
judo club in town as well, run
Good.
by Kyle Sutherland and Jocelyn Sutherland and Mason Dakin. And I was with that club for a very long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, for anyone just watching this podcast, we're going to specifically talk about the history of that Mike knows of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Nova Scotia. I've traced Japanese style Jiu-Jitsu back to 1922 here in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, and
Oh, wow.
then in the mid 50s there was Japanese Jiu-Jitsu here by way of Dalhousie Judo Club and the YMCA on Hollis Street due to John Blooming and another instructor. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I have the notes here. Anyway, and then in the 70s there was more, and then from like the late 70s on, obviously there's, I've been around, other guys have been around, but I'm really, really interested because I have some history that I know about BJJ, but you have so much. We're gonna let's nail down this history of that you know of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So how did you get started? How did you get started in martial arts?
Well, I started at Kano Kai Judo Club, that would have been in 2000 and more closer to, yeah, pretty much 2000, fall of 99. Uh, but I started then, and yeah, I was 300 pounds. Like I was very out of shape, which is, some people, but I wanted to lose that weight and try to do something for my health because I also had really bad asthma. So it wasn't just a weight issue; it was also an issue with breathing. So I
Okay.
had to kind of get rid of that. I had some very bad lifestyle changes that I had to, eliminate. I had to move on in life and move away from certain people and all kinds of things, and had to get on a good track. And I knew that the Kano Kai Judo Club was just right across the street from me, and I went over there, and Donnie McGinnis was instructing,
Oh,
and
yes, I know that name. Yeah.
yeah, and Bob McCacker and Cindy Fraser,
Oh,
and
yeah.
guys, and George O'Brien as well, and and yeah, and Jared McIntosh and Matt McGrath were doing a lot of the teaching there at the time
Okay.
for judo. They had experience with jujitsu and other things as well, but they were primarily judoka. They were trying to do as well as they could at local tournaments, New Brunswick, PEI, and then they would do national level tournaments as well. Those guys.
Oh, okay.
So they were kind of all over doing judo, and there was a lot of other guys that came through that club. There was dozens and dozens and dozens. Like Scott Tanner says that Kano Kai was a real hot spot because there were so many tough people from Pictou County.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of Scott said that there was a lot of and a lot of athletes come out of this spot as well as all kinds of talent, but the Scott Taylor really was keen to say that this the Kano Kai had done very well for a lot of years. One of the last times there was a Canada Games, most of the that when we were training a Canada Games team with Kyle Sutherland and a whole bunch of other ones, Marshall Fitt and Matty Fitt and Cody Ang Devine and Max Budgie, and they were all from our club. So there was a ton of
Oh, I
them
see.
just that all did Canada Games, and the majority of them were from our gym. So that was kind of, and now Kyle and Jocelyn are doing a good job with the gym right now. They got a lot of the young judoka, but that's where I started. And actually, I met my fiance there. She was kind
Oh,
of ending her judo career. She had just had a kid and was moving on to finishing school and doing a lot of things, and she was kind of getting out of it, and I was getting into it, and that was one of the first times we met.
okay.
So that was kind of cool. I spent a lot of time at Kano Kai training with a variety of guys. Neil Toby was one of them. He's a very skilled judoka, and there was a bunch of his friends like Brian Lake, and there was a bunch of guys, and then Jared, and then there was Troy White and Steve Patterson and Lee Sangster. There's a whole bunch of them that then
Wow.
competed for years
Such
at
great
done.
history down there. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Steve Patterson actually used to train at Bill's, and he
Okay.
would also train at Kano Kai. He would train at both because he lived in Stewiacke.
Right.
He was a real monster of a guy.
Yeah, when
The
I
little
back in
guy.
the 90s when I was competing in judo, I remember heading to New Glasgow for some competitions and stuff like
Yeah,
that. So I've
yeah.
seen a lot of those older, yeah, the older crew around, the guys that are teaching and all that stuff. So that's such great history. There's such great history for judo in Nova Scotia. It's just amazing.
Oh, it is. And Sam's uncle is actually Dave Chevry, Lisa Chevry, Greg, and Michael. They all did judo.
Right.
And her uncle Ronnie did, Chevry did karate as well.
Okay.
So they have
Okay.
a rich history. Dave Chevry competed internationally, and all the other ones were really good as well. Lisa
Wow.
taught in Pictou for years, and along Cindy, and actually, like the families are all interconnected. Different girls had done judo against one another, and all
Right.
kinds of stuff. So yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
So you can obviously correct anything when I talk about history, anything that you know that maybe I'm not aware of or maybe I'm incorrect on, feel free to correct me. But from what I understand is that there used to be a fellow named Chuck Sproul or Chucky Sproul down in
Chuck's bro, yeah.
down in Truro way, and he was very interested, obviously, in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and he used to do these Gracie cruises and try to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And that's how I know that's sort of, besides, of course, Peter and Kevin, the founders of the, BJJ for Nova Scotia. But what's your earliest introduction to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu here in Nova Scotia?
Well, I was like in judo. We had done a lot of niwaza, and a lot of the judoka that I trained with at that time were very skilled practitioners on the ground as well.
Okay.
And Jared and a guy Jason McKay had come
Oh,
into the
yeah.
club, and he was training with us, and those guys had trained quite a bit in Truro, with Chuck and everyone that was there. And then so like I could train with Jared and Matt on the ground quite a bit, and they were really good and had done both quite a bit of jiu-jitsu and other grappling sports and different things. And but Jason had done that, but he came from a traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu
Yes,
background.
I remember. I remember
Yes,
that.
exactly. So and so did Jason Rorson, who I met later on. And so they had been doing that with Calvin Crichton.
Oh yes, I know
Yeah,
of him. I've met him a
yeah.
few
Anyway,
times.
yeah. Anyway, so he they were training under him, and then Jared was they were kind of training under George and Donnie for a long time. Jared and Matt were, and I trained with Jason McCain. He put me in the crucifix, and I thought, what is this? So that was really and his guard play and the different things he did. Jared was really a heavy top player and just was a very proficient guard player too, but played more like a judoka at the time, from what I could understand. But Jason really had like a total like many different tools he was dealing with. And then a kid, a few couple of years later, came in with a blue belt, and his name was Jake McKenzie. So,
Yeah,
so yeah, yeah. So anyway, he was training there quite a bit with Marcio Fatoza, Carlinos Gracie Jr. in Truro, and Marcio Canario, and he had trained extensively with Shane Rice, and so he was coming from that background. And then, but he had there was a monster of those guys in Truro. There's a whole ton
right.
of them. Even after Peter and Kevin left, there was a plethora of them.
You
Right?
know, it's I think it's almost safe to say like Truro was definitely that area was a hub for BJJ because who would have thought that, I believe Matt Serra was there once teaching,
Yeah.
obviously Carlos Gracie Jr. and this other gentleman you mentioned. Who would ever
Marcio Fatoza. Marcio Fatoza is a multiple-time world champion from
Yeah.
Gracie Baja. He's one of the great. He's the current coach of Gracie Baja.
Wow.
Yeah.
And roughly what time, like what year do you think this
Well,
might have
I
been?
wasn't there during any of
Yeah.
that time,
I think
but
it was the like late 90s, like mid
yes,
late
Jake had
90s.
grown up there. I had started in 2000, and Jake was already a blue belt.
Right.
So yeah.
I'll be chatting with him soon because I was at training at his school and I interviewed his wife, who's amazing. So
Oh, he's
we
great.
talked a
Oh,
lot
he's
about history, but I'll be hitting that guy up soon.
yeah, no, for sure. That's great. I can't wait to hear that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved? You just started going from
Well,
judo to
I
BJJ?
started training quite a bit with I had lived across the street from the school, and I was training a lot with all those guys there, and then uh, uh, there was quite a few of them that had moved away. Neil Toby, Brian Lake, and a bunch of them. And I was training at the gym, uh, doing fitness like squats, deadlifts, whatever. I wasn't really good at weightlifting like I am now. I became a personal trainer, but
Oh,
uh,
wonderful.
I wasn't really deep into it at that point. And Jared said, "Hey, you're living across the street. Why don't you come over and train with us sometime on the off nights?" And the majority of what they're doing was on the ground.
Right.
So it was all, and that's where I met Jason McKay, and then Jared asked me to come over and train with them, and then we were doing judo and jujitsu all the time. They'd call me the Terminator because I would fall so many times and just get back up.
Right. Well, from your judo background, you probably loved it. Because
Yeah,
if you're not familiar with training judo, a lot of people don't like getting thrown.
it's hard, but I found it's just so necessary.
A
I've
hundred
been
percent.
trained with some really big guys, and I very rarely get hurt because
Right.
I know how to concede to them. I know when to tap, obviously, but I can let it go and keep very defensive. I
Yep.
like training with bigger people. It's probably my favorite thing about jujitsu. I can't right now because I have a hernia, but and I've been up in the air with people and big huge sweeps, and I just fall because of my judo, and I it's very hard to get hurt.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, especially
So
when you know how
yeah.
to fall and you try to stay relaxed and it's
Exactly. Yeah, it saved
just
my
amazing.
bacon more time than once.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, what was training like back then?
So it was intense. It was good. I had trained at Kano Kai, and within 4 years, I got my brown belt.
Yep.
So it took me 4 years. I got my brown belt, and then I was graded by Brian Degas at a grading.
I know Brian very well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
such a
he
great
he
fellow.
graded us, and I got my brown belt, and then it had gone until right until 2012 until I got my black belt in
Yep.
judo. So I trained all that time just as a brown belt, just and Cindy always used to say, like, we've got all your points here. He's like, she would say, most people kind of they do judo, they go away, whatever. You just kind of stuck around. So I kind of it's different. Like in judo, every 5 6 years, there's all these monster kids coming up that are just so strong, and same as
Right.
like something like boxing. Like it's just those young killers, man. Like whew, young brown belts,
Yeah.
black belts. Like there's some tough ones, right? So to stick around in that made my judo a lot better.
Oh yeah, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. I mean,
Back then,
judo's,
training was quite intense. And then what had happened, we started going to Truro.
yeah.
Chris White and Jared McIntosh took me to Truro with Jason McKay, and we started training with Jake there. Jake was training judo with us, but then I would go down. There's a few years there. Jake had kind of taken some time off, and he came back, and we were sitting at the West Side School, and he drove by, and I thought, who's that monster kid in the back seat? And he kind of stared at me, and I said, "Oh my God, it's Jake!" So Jake had gained a whole bunch of weight. I think he was 15 when I met him, and 17 then.
Yeah.
So 16 or 17, and um, we started then training in Truro, and we were training under Chuck, learning a whole bunch of stuff and learning, different newer techniques because, Chuck had kept really to the specific system of Gracie Jiu
Right.
Jitsu that he was taught by Carlinhos and Henzo and all that. But then Jake had all these variants and stuff like that. It was really interesting to see that. So that's when we started going from Truro to Halifax,
Right. And
and I
of
was
course, keeping in
introduced.
mind, sorry to interrupt you, there
Yeah,
wasn't, people weren't putting out videos at the time.
no, everything. My biggest thing
Yeah.
that Jake's dad Gary told me one time was to keep a journal, and I
Yeah.
have like after that, like
Wise
that was a game
advice.
changer.
You can,
I used to go on forums with Roy Harris,
yes.
forums, and research techniques that way.
Okay. Yeah. There was no, I don't think there was YouTube. I can't remember. I would
There
imagine.
was YouTube didn't come until I moved to Halifax.
Okay. So yeah.
Yeah.
So anyone watching this, you couldn't go on and learn the newest moves. You actually had to go train under an instructor and, blood, sweat, and tears.
Oh yeah, we had a lot of books. Like me and my friends were really. I remember getting Henzo and Hoyler's book and Dao Jeet Kune Do
Ah, nice.
and different books by like Neil Adams and all kinds of stuff like that. And of course, Jigaro Kano's um, Kodokan Judo. I had studied that quite a bit. That was a book that was hot
That's
on my list. I would always read that one.
good for you. I find a lot of people nowadays don't research books at all. There are some
Oh,
people that do, but old school people, will still look at books and,
everyone go to thrift books. You can get some really cheap books on thrift books. It's a great spot to
okay.
pick up some books. Yeah.
That's on its website.
Yeah, thrift books. Yeah,
I'll
Canada.
look it up
It's
because
excellent. Yeah, a
yeah,
lot of it's similar to Amazon. It's an exchange, right? You can get a lot
okay.
of used books there, but they all come. They're all gems. Everyone treats their stuff really good on there.
That's okay. I will look it up. So you were training Chuck. Now, real quick, Chuck Sproul didn't end up sticking with it, right? He kind of moved on or retired or did something else that you know of.
He was into like a lot of fitness training, and he had trained a lot with like Ori Hofmeckler, who was like who had written the Warrior Diet. Chuck was
Right.
certified in the Warrior Diet, and he also trained a lot with what's his name, Scott Sonnen, a lot.
Okay.
He trained extensively with Scott Sonnen.
Right.
Yeah.
And for
So
the
he didn't do any martial arts with Scott Sonnen, but he did all that flow fit and kettlebells and club bells and all that stuff
right.
that he was really into. And he had trained me up until in 2004 when I went to Pan Am's. I was doing personal training lessons under Chuck.
Okay.
So and I was in some of the best shape of my life. Like I lost the match, but next day the buddy was in a halo. Like
Oh, wow.
oh, it was a rough one. That
Yeah.
was a rough match. That was one of my. I think that was my first jujitsu match ever. I did Pan Am's. That was my first jujitsu match.
Right. And
Yeah.
so, not to talk too personal about people, but I think Chuck Sproul, he came into some money because his parents owned a lumber mill or something, and he sold
Yep.
it,
Yep.
and he got a lot of money from it, and that's why he could travel and train and basically just
part of it,
do.
but a lot of his business ventures, he was making a lot of money. He had
Oh,
sold
I see.
a whole bunch of different things like mouth guards and selling different fitness stuff. Like he had made a lot of that money back, man.
Wonderful. Good for him.
Yeah,
Good
yeah,
for him. So
yeah.
then you decided to, oh, and of course, Peter and Kevin would come down occasionally. You'd see those guys too.
I wouldn't see them there because that time had passed. The person who was teaching primarily at Chuck's at that point, Chuck had taught quite a bit, and then through the summer when I was there with just Jake, I was going down
Okay.
with Chris White, a friend of mine, who's a purple belt under Jared McIntosh, but had trained under Marcio Fatosa, Marcio Canario during his like 19, 18, 19, 20. He would train with them.
Okay.
And he's still like the guy's a monster role, and he just had a heart attack recently. God love you, Chris, but man,
Wow.
Chris was just the day I tapped Chris, I was like, man, I was like, I'm actually going to get good at this.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but Chris was heading down, and um, so and then Jake was teaching there primarily.
Right.
Jake was the one teaching, so we would go down and learn from Jake during that summer, and then he kind of taken on teaching from Chuck, and then I trained a whole year with Jake because I moved to Truro to take human services and end up spending most of my time in the gym.
Okay.
So I had after that year I had moved when I was done that I went and moved to Halifax, and then shortly after Jake moved there.
Okay. Let's
So
talk about that. So now we're in maybe a new era. You left Truro.
yes.
You decided to move to Halifax for work. Did you go there for work or?
Kind of. I worked as a bouncer and did
Okay.
landscaping and some different things there, but it was primarily to train. But
Good
I,
for
I
you.
worked. I worked at the Palace. I worked at the Ale House. Like,
Oh, that's a whole different podcast, the Palace Days. And the
right.
training you guys did. Oh my God. I'm
Yeah.
gonna hopefully for our 20th episode interview Peter Martell or Kevin, but I know Kevin's really private. But
No, Kev don't like that stuff. I don't
yeah,
think.
so I'll interview Peter. We talk. Man, that guy's got so much history. But
Oh
anyway,
man,
so you
that guy
moved to
was a
Halifax.
monster. What's that?
You
So
moved to Halifax.
we moved to Halifax, and actually before that, a couple years before that, I was training with a guy. My first in entrance to striking was this guy named DJ Kennedy. And I actually trained under two guys, Craig Droyron and Ed Burns. And they were both kickboxers and had done quite a few kickboxing fights. They did a lot of taekwondo. These
Right.
guys are really extensive in taekwondo, and then they did kickboxing. There's no longer much kickboxing in Pictou County anymore. I think a few people do fitness kickboxing.
Yeah.
But uh, I had trained with this guy, DJ Kennedy, who had trained a lot with this Philip guy. I forget. I think it was Philip Jalna in Montreal.
Oh yeah, Philip
And,
Jelenis. He's a friend of mine. Yes.
yeah, so
Yep.
DJ was training with him, and DJ was teaching me Muay Thai, and then I started learning Cali as well.
Ah, good for
So
you.
yeah, that was my first
Yeah, that's
introduction, and
awesome.
I had never really. And my friend Ricky Goodall was doing a lot of kickboxing there too, and he trained quite extensively under DJ Kennedy as well. But then when I got to Halifax, I'd been doing all these Thai drills,
Yeah.
and really building up my power and everything. And I got in with some of the guys sparring, and Pete's like, "Wow, do you want to fight?" Because I was doing so well, I was hanging in there and throwing hard shots. But what I realize now, after I've trained with Mike McGraw and Tom and Duke, is that you don't want to be there. You don't
Yeah.
want to be there in those exchanges. You want to be away from that. So we trained a lot of jiu-jitsu. We trained a lot of MMA. I trained with Ralph. I trained with Roger. I trained with Kyle. I trained with Kevin. I trained with Peter. I trained with a whole bunch of guys who there's tons of them that don't even train anymore.
Right.
And then there was a next generation that it came on, which was like Josh Winsey, John Gale.
Yeah.
A lot of those guys had just started and were getting
Right.
pretty good, right? Yeah.
Right. So when
Yeah.
you guys were then you of course which Titans were you at? Because I know they used to be below Sicilian Pizza, and then they were in a
First time
shopping
I trained, we were in
plaza.
Chocolate Lake.
Okay, I
Chocolate
remember
Lake.
that. Yeah,
This is
I've
the
never
first
been
time
there, but I remember their history. So
yeah,
yeah,
we trained at Chocolate Lake.
yeah.
And then this is what really turned it for me, Ray, is I started taking, when I was living in Truro and in New Glasgow, I started taking private lessons from Peter Martell. And I
Oh,
must have spent thousands, and he gave me all kinds of friggin' deals. And it's just
yeah.
ridiculous, man, like how close I am to that guy. And, it kind of chokes me up because it's been such an
Well, he's a
amazing.
legend. I mean, no matter
Oh
what,
man, like to
we
see
could
that
say
guy
it
move on
now,
the
but
mats, like to see that guy move on the mats, man, he could play any guard, like
yeah,
any. It was ridiculous. And his ability to intake information, Rowan Cunningham told me one time, is at a very high level,
Yeah.
right? He, yeah, yeah, man.
Well,
Whew.
you know, we would say it later on in the podcast, but we'll say it now. We all know that Peter and Kevin are I consider them the fathers of BJJ in Nova Scotia. You know, that's my own personal opinion. Maybe Chuck
Yeah.
Sproul was kind of got introduced to it, but
Well,
those
you
guys,
can't, you got to say Shane Rice. He's also in
oh,
there. And so,
Shane
so
Rice, there's a
was
whole
Rowan
bunch of
Cunningham,
people.
right? Rowan
Yeah,
Cunningham. And then there was a whole different lineage. You got all these guys in Cape Breton that have come up recently because I went to a tournament about 15 years ago, 12 years
right.
ago in Cape Breton, and the guys, and then there's all these guys that have come on. There's tons of black belts there. It's
Oh,
the
yeah.
same as Dartmouth. Like there's like, Chad Simmons and you got Joel and all these guys. There's tons of people down
Oh,
there.
definitely.
It's
I
like a
totally agree
huge,
with you
yeah,
now there is, but
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
I'm considering like
I'm
based
just
on
giving
history.
credence to the other people too, right? I
Yeah,
got to
no, no, everybody's
everyone,
great.
right?
Sorry, yeah. I'm
Yeah,
just okay, so let's put it this way then. I'd say, and you correct me if I'm wrong then, about 90% of black belts in Nova Scotia can probably trace their lineage back to Peter and Kevin. Maybe
for
not all of them.
sure.
Okay.
You have to
We'll leave it
realize
at
that in
that.
Truro, like all those other guys, like Rowan trained a lot with Peter and Kevin initially.
Yeah,
When he was traveling from the valley and coming up, having
right.
moved from Hamilton, training at Jocelyn's
Yeah.
and a whole bunch of other places. In Rowan's big thing, my big thing sometimes, I like to club crash. I like to go to places where I'm affiliated. Sometimes I'm not, I'll go anyway. And, I like to club crash. And that's how Rowan said, because I went down there to the valley multiple times and trained with Rowan
Yeah,
Cunningham
and
and
for
the
people who
students
don't know,
and
Rowan, he
with Pat.
started
Pat,
Abaya.
Abaya, yes, he
Yeah,
did. Yeah, but he
Rowan
trained
Cunningham
extensively
started
with us.
Abaya.
Yeah, he trained extensively with us. Like when he was getting ready for MMA fights, he would train with like Roger and Ralph and Peter and
Yeah.
everybody, roll with Kevin. And, because Kevin wasn't doing much striking at that point. He had kind of he had done that and he was like, getting into his 40s and being a little more cautious, right? So,
Oh, he was a great
but,
Taekwondo stylist too under Travis
oh yeah,
Garrett. I
man.
mean,
Like
he was,
that's how Kyle Sanford got his start was learning. He told me under Kevin, he learned all that stuff under Kevin, right?
yeah,
And then he followed Kevin. But there's a huge history also with Kyle Sanford and Shane Rice as well.
yes,
And Shane trained at Gracie Baja, and actually at Gracie Baja, Shane one time had a few exchanges with Jared McIntosh, and it was
right.
just a crazy role, like just insane level. I wasn't there, but there were stories about it, right? Jake had talked about it, and
Yeah.
it's
Well,
really
they
cool.
started one of the first, they might have back around 1995, I'll say 96 to be sure. There was a gentleman teaching in Lower Sackville, Steve Burgess. He's a
Oh
really
yes,
well-known
yeah,
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy now,
yeah,
phenomenal, good karate guy too. But
yeah,
back then, he was a black belt in karate, but he was just trying to get involved with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu himself.
yep.
And he opened I would say it's the first full-time academy in HRM, we'll say. It was in a mall in Sackville. It's not even there anymore. And that's where Shane Rice, he started there when he was like, I think he was like a teenager or, in his 19 or
Nice.
something. And Kyle Sanford, I think, was there as well. Because I remember going there, training with him a couple times and meeting those guys. And then I think Steve went away. He's in the military. He was gone. And then Shane and Kyle, he just started going to Peter or wherever they went. But it's such great history. It's just amazing. Just amazing.
Oh, it's crazy. And I mean, like, and the thing is, like, the whole time I was training there, these guys would amp up their training every time to go down and train at Gracie Baja or train at Henzo's. And it was like
Right.
you were training with these guys and it was all good and you're getting smashed and things are, like training's going on. And then they're amping up to go to New York and it's like a whole different level. You're like, oh my God, these guys are just going like berserker movie style here. And
Yeah.
I just like it, and then I kind of learned like, wow, this is really how you. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I was training judo at Bill Anderson's the entire time I was at Halifax. I also trained
Wow.
kind of trained at Bill Anderson's the whole time.
Yeah. That's
So
another
yeah,
guy that's been around forever.
oh
Bill
man, like
Anderson.
God bless you, Bill. Like
Yeah.
I do anything for Bill too, right? My buddy Kevin Innocente, who's Aaron Jollymore's cousin. He's trained a lot extensively under Bill. He has
Right.
a green or blue belt. I'm sorry, Kevin, under Bill Anderson, and we still train quite a bit. And I think Bill, once I get my judo uh, really established here in New Glasgow. My 2 nights a week that don't conflict with Kano Kai. I got two separate nights: Tuesdays 7 to 8, and Saturdays 4 to 5 or 4:30 to 5:30. I have judo, so I'm trying to
Yeah.
push that. But Bill Anderson is actually going to come down, I believe, and
No way.
he's going to come down with Kevin, so he'll drive down
Wow. I'm not
and
sure. I don't
check it
want to
out.
say how
Yeah.
old he is, but he's got to be, a little bit older now.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and Bill, like when I was
But
training, was still doing all the relays and all the push-ups and squats, and
oh yeah.
he was still doing all that stuff, right?
I
Like
mean, Jason Scott and Jamie Slomwhite and Scott Tanner
Scott
and all
Tanner,
those
yeah,
guys. So
Jackie
many came
Cameron,
up
yeah, yeah,
through,
Ben Scissorson. There was quite a few of them, yeah.
Bill.
Ben was a monster too.
And you must know my old judo coach, Vitek Kaleja.
Oh well, he would come down to Kano Kai and do a lot of training camps there.
Yeah.
And I remember I hit his eye one time when I think it was Danny. You know, Danny was a taxi driver. What's his last
Oh yeah,
name?
Danny Eiston. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so
Yeah,
I
passed
threw
away.
Danny with Tominagi. I was a green belt, and he was a green belt. I threw him with Tominagi. That same tournament, I ended up losing to Josh Albright, and that started me training at Bloomdale.
Josh Albright. Yeah, it was the
So
one
I
you
started
wrestled.
training extensively with Josh Albright after that in wrestling with Morgan Marchand and
Yeah.
Brett and Sean and all the other boys there
Oh yeah,
and
that's a
Ryan
whole
and everybody
different thing.
else.
We'll talk about that too, because the
Yes,
Metro Amateur Wrestling Club, we'll get on that, but we'll
yeah,
stick just with judo just for the moment.
yes,
Judo
yes.
BJJ. There's so many things that we could go in different directions.
So VTech had told me that I'd look really good that day because I threw Danny, but then I ended up losing to Josh. But Josh had I went in for the sprawl and he just sucked himself underneath me and hit me with an arm lock. It was a really nice sequence.
I'll have
And
to
then I
look.
had
I
beat
might.
him at an Abaya Open a few years later. I beat him, and
Right.
it was all that training I had done with him that brought me to that point, right? And all the other wrestlers and the judo and everything. One time,
Yeah.
Jackie Cameron and I clashed heads because I shot in a double because you could still do that in judo, and I came up and my head, I didn't know it was cut, and Jackie was cut on the eye. I was like, Bill, that's pretty bad because he was ref. And he goes, your head's cut right on the side there, Mike. So I was sliced open too. So me and Jackie spent the rest of the day in the ER getting kind of taken
Wow.
out. Right? Yeah.
So Josh Albright, yeah, because myself and Victor, we were business partners and we ran the Victorious Judo Jiu-Jitsu Club for a number of years. I think I'm going to say at least 4 years. So that's where Danny Eiston and Bob, I can't remember his
Oh,
last name.
Bob. Yeah. Yeah.
He was a bootlegger in Spryfield. And Josh Albright was with the wrestling club. So just kind of veering off away from BJJ and judo for a minute. For those that don't know, the Metro Amateur Wrestling Club is Nova Scotia's oldest recognized wrestling club. I'm pretty sure. And it was co-founded by one of my friends, former teacher at my school, Mike Heilman.
Oh, I
And
learned my fireman's from Mike.
there you
And
go.
yeah, I learned it.
And
It's kind of every time I learned the fireman's, it was very similar, right? So,
yeah. And so we were located in what we call Bloomfield Recreation Center. We were in the basement. And when I closed, I had a full-time Japanese jiu-jitsu school, but in 94, around 94, I went bankrupt just because I got divorced and blah, 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 and went bankrupt. And thanks to Mike Hallman, I used their wrestling club for our Japanese jiu-jitsu and kickboxing and stuff. But anyway, we built it up over the years. We were there for, I think, a total of 11 years. And then eventually Mike Hallman retired. He got out. And then there was another gentleman, what would be his name? Wrestling coach.
Corey Robinson.
Corey, that's it. Corey kind of took over.
I
And
trained
then
a lot under Corey. Yeah.
yeah. And then eventually they completely left and we just stayed there until eventually they closed the building down. But you were training Metro Amateur Wrestling. Let's hear about that.
So I trained Jake when I was training in Truro. He said, I'm doing a lot of wrestling, Mike. I've been doing judo, but I've been learning wrestling. So I said, well, that's cool because you could still shoot double legs and stuff in judo.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
this is perfect, right? I can still do all the same stuff. So there was a lot of cross training there. And I know that Scott Tanner and Corey Robinson are good friends, and they actually share a lot of similar accolades.
Yeah. Well, they're both phenomenal coaches and
Oh
I
man,
mean,
like next
no
level. Like
question,
so,
high
I
level.
was training there, and Peter was teaching us, and Mike they were teaching, and actually Kyle Sanford was there a couple times and wrestled with us.
I think TJ Grant might have been there too.
He wasn't there when I was there.
Okay.
My first jiu-jitsu competition I had after Pan Am's was against Gearhart, TJ Grant, Jason Rorson, and that was one of the. I think it was a second or third. I think it was a second Fit Plus Open.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was. I think it might have been the first. I'll have to ask Scott about that, but he'll remember. But and we fought in the Fit Plus gym, and
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
There's another whole history, man. Those guys too
Oh
been
yes,
around
man.
forever. It's so
Yeah. So,
much.
but in wrestling, like I learned a lot of stuff. I trained with Johnny and Morgan and all
Yeah.
those guys, Stick and Spider, and there were so many different kids. And Brett and Mike LeBlanc were there, and then Sean Spurvey was there later on, and he was just a monster. Like Sean had so many accolades too, and but then Josh and Morgan and Johnny and Roy Park,
Roy,
and
yeah.
I
Roy,
competed
Johnny
against
Grant,
Roy.
all those
I
guys.
have competed against Roy a few times, and my buddy Mitch DeCoste competed against Roy a ton of times, and my buddy Odin competed. Odin Robichaud, who's a black belt under me, and also it's not a black belt under me. We got our black belt the same day from Bill, but he's a blue belt under me. This guy, and he's competed extensively against Roy as well in judo
Yeah.
years ago when Roy was a yellow belt and Odin was a green belt before he had gotten out of it, and then when he came back, Roy and Odin had another matchup.
Yeah, I remember those names because I know back in the 90s we were doing a lot of submission grappling, not PJJ, but and you
Yeah,
didn't even call it no gi at the time. It was just submission grappling. But
yeah.
Josh Albright and Roy and Johnny Grant, they used to come over and train with us and we'd go back and forth. And eventually Josh was teaching at my school and Roy was there for a while too. But man, those guys, and they're not maybe so much training anymore, but they're all still around. They're still
Well, and
around.
you look like and Alex Diaz, dad, I forget his name. Like, man, that guy was like Alex Diaz was a monster.
Yeah.
Monster. I have one really good story about a Japanese player that was in that came to Glasgow one time to compete. He was living in Amherst and going to school and training with Steve Patterson a little bit there, and he was training at the Amherst Judo Club, and he had come down, and my buddy Donnie McGinnis's son Corey competed against him, and so did Mitch DeCoste, and so did Alex Diaz. And
Right.
Alex kept trying to go in for the one arm shoulder throw and just couldn't get it. And this Japanese guy wrapped him up in his gi, held him down, and just pinned him. And I was like, wow, like Alex later became like a Pan American champion. I think he trained in Montreal for years at Montreal
Wow.
Wrestling Club. So um, for that Japanese guy to pin him, and he threw my buddy Mitch, like he threw the Corey came off the mat, and Ben Scissorson goes, "What was that like?" Because the Japanese guy just threw him for Ippon instantly. He goes, "Man, I got out there, I grabbed that guy, and it was like an empty jacket." And I was like, "Man, oh my!" I wanted to compete against him, but he was tired. He'd already
Yeah.
done all these matches. I was going to try to fight him, but then he's like, "No." And so it was cool, but I got to meet him, and I asked him if he was a lot of Pride going on at the time. We're watching Pride,
Yep.
and over in Japan, and I said, "Do you know who Vanderlei Silva?" He goes, "Oh, Vanderlei Silva, I know this name." So I thought that was really cool. But that guy was a monster. He was throwing those guys with Uchimata that day. He's ranked 10th in Japan, I believe.
Wow.
He was 10th, yeah, at one
Wow,
point.
that's
He had
amazing.
a broken wrist and never really healed right. And the guy loved whiskey and cigars. He's just a, but he
Wow.
just came out and whooped everyone's ass that day. It was pretty cool.
So you were training with the wrestling club for a while. Obviously, you were training at Titans, and you just trained you as much as you could, eh?
Yeah, quite a bit. I was going to do an MMA fight, and I ended up getting hurt.
Yeah.
I was supposed to fight Craig Skinner.
Oh yes, yeah, I remember him.
Yeah,
These
and
guys
TJ
are
Grant ended up
Ricky
fighting him
Goodall, all
instead.
these guys you're naming. It's like, oh, I remember all these fellas. It's so
Oh
great.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I was supposed to compete against Craig, and TJ ended up competing against him.
Yeah.
And then I was kind of injured, so I took some time off, and then I came back to it, and I was training primarily. Gotten away from striking,
Yep.
and I kind of got primarily more into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and doing that kind of thing. And I just kind of, yeah, I ended up leaving Halifax and after a couple of years and coming back to Pictou County. And Jared had already established a Jiu-Jitsu gym inside of Kano Kai.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
right.
someone else I'm going to have to talk to very shortly too.
Yeah.
I'll hit
So
him up.
I had, but I could. the rapport still continued where I was continuing to go to Halifax, but then Jake was training. He was training at Titan still, but he was more traveling like everywhere.
Yeah, that's an
Oh, it was,
incredible story. To go from,
yeah,
Truro as a blue belt, young, to being like the most decorated Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitor in Canadian history.
yeah. And I
It's
mean, just,
what an
like
amazing.
his
And
mindset, like it's like Gary says, he's like he could take that. Like I remember Jake used to do um, uh, rowing with his belt. Like he used to use the impact rower and like and uh, and grab his belt. And he goes, man, Gary used to say like Jake could just row that thing till his fingers fell off. Jake wasn't the most gifted guy or anything like that. He just had the most work ethic,
yeah, yeah,
and that was, and you come to realize that all these guys that are really good have actually put a lot of friggin' time in. Like,
right, exactly.
yeah,
And we should give really good credit too to Jake's father, because what an inspiring person to devote so much time and money and to help Jake do his dream.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, like he's written me a few times on Facebook, and like his father Gary has, and I have nothing. I don't never met the guy, but so much respect for someone that gives their child everything they could do to just get so good in their art.
Oh, exactly. He
Just
spent
it's
tons
amazing.
and tons and tons of time.
Yeah.
And I competed against some guys from Atos.
Oh yeah.
One, like Jared competed against Josh Hinger. I competed against Pete O'Neill. But those guys were also guys who were supported, you know, to become as best as they could, and they were, sleeping on couches in San Diego and just mat
Wow.
monsters, right? Just,
Yeah.
and it was great to compete against Pete and meet him and hang out and watch videos afterwards and all that stuff. I mean, it was war beforehand, but this guy was a really cool guy after. Like, I thought it was
Wow.
really,
So did you
yeah.
travel down? Did you travel anywhere to train at all? Or
I've
you
been to
mostly?
I've been to TriStar
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Kevin Tucker. I trained under Faraz there.
yeah. He was
Just
here.
grappling.
He was in Halifax once.
Oh,
He was
Faraz.
here for a UFC, but then he taught at Bushido Kai, my old club. But he
Oh
also
wow.
taught where I think TJ Grant had him when they were at Pro Edge Sports as well.
Oh,
So
nice.
good
Wow.
guy. Just well,
Faraz is
yeah,
awesome, man.
just
Like, ooh.
amazing.
Yeah, and like I've trained extensively with Oliver Taz and a lot of the guys from the Death Squad.
Oh yes, yeah,
Before the switch,
yeah.
and Oliver Taz has said like, man, Varas is really coming on. So Varas was always a great grappler, and then like super, like unbelievably high level, and then Varas reached another level, just even beyond that. And now
Wow,
he's still getting better and better all the time, and
amazing.
because I think he's so intelligent and he values volume over impact. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like he trains in volume, and he's just super smart guy. Like,
Yeah, it was a pleasure training under him. And we had two showers in our club, but we didn't have a towel. And he's like, I need to shower before the airport. Just give me a roll of paper towel. He's like paper towel. And
oh, he's
I
cool,
drove him to
man.
the airport. It was great.
Yeah.
So listen,
I
question for
trained in
you.
New York also under Henzo and Donaher. Uh,
Oh, how
yeah,
was that?
that was good. I trained with a lot of the Death Squad guys like Ethan Creeliston and Oliver Taza. I trained extensively with, and I met Nicky Ryan, and I went down and just trained with all these guys. Like I did tons of
Training must have
rounds.
been hard, like really
Oh, it
tough.
was awesome, man. Like when you get in that room, I don't know what it is. Your level just goes to the roof. I trained with Jake Shields. I trained with
Wow.
Oliver Teza, and the guys at Donahur's were so keen. I'm sure that's the way it is at B Team and New Wave now, because I know that lineage is passed on. Is that the guys there when you're there, they're there to make sure you get those friggin' techniques.
Right,
I'm telling you, like they drilled in that heel hook into me so many times in the roll that like
right.
it's just, yeah,
Yeah, the
crazy.
average person probably doesn't understand where they might go to class 2 times a week for an hour or whatever they do, and they learn their moves and they roll a bit and they go home. But to really realize what yourself and these other athletes have gone through as far as hard physical training, like
Yes,
no
I'm
give.
destroyed from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I get surgery on the seventh, Ray. You'll have to come visit me in the hospital.
I will absolutely if
Yeah.
you're there. That's
I'll send
wow.
you the address and you'll have to come by. We
What are
get
you
a
getting
picture with
done?
me post-op. Yeah.
What's happening?
I'm getting hiatal hernia surgery.
Okay.
Yeah. And I got to get my knee done. And I had my ear operated on previously
Okay.
last year. Had my ear operated on because it was really bad cauliflower. And then we had Dr. Neil Showman from Dalhousie, shout out, scraped my ear open and got everything back to where it needs to be.
Wow. And man, well, I wish you all the best with all that. And did you know that there's some kids nowadays that like to sit home and rub their ears just to look
I
tough?
was one of those guys. I was one. And then it turned worse. Don't do that, guys. It's not worth it. You look like
There you go.
Sakuraba or Randy Couture. It's not worth it.
Yeah, the black belt, the real black belt right there. So I won't keep you too much longer. But how has training when you originally started to training now is obviously much different due to social media, the internet, and all that stuff. And obviously, so many techniques are being developed all the time, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And I guess, what have you noticed? Like a big change from when you originally started to now?
I think it's a lot of the same techniques. I know that in jiu-jitsu and judo, there's a huge amount of like, I'm going to hold on to this and you might not figure it out kind of deal.
Okay.
I'm very open with things. I teach everyone, you want to learn a technique, like I'll tell you whatever I know. It's just how it goes. But a lot of guys kind of, they hide their techniques from you and then you figure out later on, like, because I know I spent, when I was a purple belt, I had it for 7 years, right? Because all
Yep.
these guys that now own like Jake and there was Presley and Joel and Josh and the other Josh and Jolly Moore and all kinds of guys. There was tons and tons. Kyle and everybody that was there and I had spent a lot of time competing and learning at those belts.
Right.
And that was the biggest technical innovation for me was I learned everything that I was missing about jujitsu in those years. And then later I studied it further. Like I trained a lot also with TJ Grant, Richard Kanastovich, Chad Cox. Like I competed against Chad, I've competed against Richard, I've competed against TJ. But we just became, because we were age cohorts, we became very good friends.
Right. Right.
So I got to give a huge shout out to those guys. And Scott was always really good to me. And tried to spend as much as but I found that the biggest technical innovation was taking those years and all those hundreds of hours of beatings.
Yeah.
Just like, man, like when you're the low man in the totem pole in the room and you're a belt above these guys, you really learn a lot. And then you come around and then now like I feel when I come back to it I'll be a lot better. Like my last trainings with some of these guys and
Right.
some different guys I've been doing very well. But then I
Yeah.
had to stop. I haven't really trained now aside from with kids and some of the smaller guys for like a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't trained
Yeah,
much,
but I
but
mean, it's there. It's part of your life, right? It's
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
so it's and that makes a huge difference. I mean, like yourself, martial arts for me is my entire life, and I mean, I got my blue belt in BJJ. That's my journey now, trying to learn more about it to improve my other arts.
Yeah.
So you nonstop, you learn how. Back when you were originally training, I don't think no one was a black belt yet, correct?
Correct.
And now there's 91 black belts in Nova Scotia. Is that
We knew
crazy?
back then this was going to take off, Ray. We knew
Yeah.
it was going to, because man, it's just a popular sport. Like,
And I think I have to look at my notes here, but I think there's 31 BJJ clubs now in Nova Scotia altogether, or 24. One of the two. I have it on my notes here. I'm trying to look through, but who would have thought that many clubs in Nova Scotia?
I think it's amazing, and I think that each one of them has a separate history, whether it's connected to, my lineage or another lineage. I mean, there's just so much. Like, um, a lot of these guys that I competed against are now all gym owners or part of the black belt crew in their gym, and like my buddy Matt Hamilton or Matt Hamill. Is it Matt Hamilton? Matt Hamilton just got his black belt. Yeah,
Okay, he's probably on my
yeah,
list.
yeah, yeah. Matt Hamilton. He's a great guy, and I competed a lot against him. He did an MMA fight with Matt McGrath one time, and then later on I competed against him in jiu-jitsu. He's a great buddy of mine.
Right.
And Jacob from Grants just got his black belt too, and he's an awesome guy too.
He's definitely on the list. People will send me when someone gets their black belt, I'll either see it online or someone will send me and I'll update the Nova Scotia BJJ page. I can't find exactly, but I know there's a lot of clubs. There's definitely a lot of clubs. It's growing so
Oh man,
much.
there's going to be more. And
Yeah,
what'll happen? It's just a natural progression. Like these guys get so good. Like Kevin said, he goes, you can't expect someone to train for 10, 15 years and not want to open their own gym, you know? So
sure.
something that kind of happens, and those clubs will again divide, and something will happen, and there'll be growth, and there'll be a new person that steps in and learns it for their first time. And that's really still my favorite thing, is when that person steps in for the first time and they're nervous, whether it's a child or an adult, and they're new to it and just very green. And I'm like, come on, like just we have so much to offer you, you know.
Yeah. And the
And
tournament scene has exploded.
there's a season. You can
Yeah.
go to tons of tournaments. Like I look at the 16th of November, there's a Jake McKenzie seminar that day. Derek Clark is having an FLA that night, and my friend Jared Hughes is fighting on it. One of my students and teammates, and then we're having a Tucker seminar the very next day. There's just so much just packed into just that weekend. I
Wow.
mean, it's like there's just so much going on. Like it's just limitless. Like you could, there's so many tournaments, and there's so much, and money is starting to becoming a big thing. Like guys are
Okay.
getting paid. Like Jake McKenzie is, and everyone's been doing it. Like I remember the first person that had a $500 prize for their absolute. It was like that was a big deal. Like
Can you imagine? Yeah, because I mean, back in the even the early 2000s, there might have been one tournament, and that was
that,
it.
I was competing in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And obviously New Brunswick is its own province, but they got their own rich history as well,
Well, they do. Yeah.
BJJ and tournaments and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's just going to keep going. Just real quick, couple fun questions for you then.
Yep.
What type of martial art? You watch some martial art movies? Anything you like in particular? Or
If
you
I
don't
was
mind?
watching currently, I'd say John Wick, and they got a man. I'll go back. That Game of Death scene with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I could watch that, and then when he goes at it with Dan Inosanto
Oh
and the
yeah, Dan
Filipino
and
guy, and
Sano, yeah.
I could watch Game of Death or Enter the Dragon any day of the week, man. Like I
Yeah.
love that
And
stuff.
of course, he wasn't in the rest of the movie, right?
No, he wasn't. No,
Yeah,
I
he
know that.
passed
Yeah.
away. But here's trivia for everybody. As far as I know, that's the only movie where they had a death scene of a person in the coffin, but they used the real death scene. So
Oh
Bruce Lee in the
wow.
movie, he was dead, or he was pretending to be dead as an actor or something, but they used his real video footage of his death, of him in the coffin in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the last scene when the pagoda with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and of course Guru Dan and all that, so yeah, it's amazing.
Oh man.
And what are you reading? Anything in particular, martial arts wise? You used to read magazines and all that stuff.
The one I'm really liking now, because I've been trying to help my buddy Jared Hughes as much as I can. He's doing FLA and stuff.
Yeah.
He's also his girlfriend and Derek's wife are related. Derek
Okay.
Clark's wife. So yeah, they have quite a good rapport. But the one I'm reading right now, two ones, is Rodrigo Gracie's MMA book, No Holds Barred,
Yeah.
and I'm reading BJ Penn's book, Close Guard, and the Book of Knowledge. That's what I'm
Okay.
really into right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know a gentleman? His last name is Sampson, but he's up St. Peter's way.
Samson.
Yeah, I have his name here. I'm going to pronounce it wrong, and I'll do push-ups because of it. He just opened martial arts school up there, BJJ school. I believe it's Kealan. Keelan?
Keelan?
I'm
Keelan
not sure. He
Sampson.
just
I've heard
fought
of
in.
this guy. I don't know Keelan.
That's
I hope
okay.
he's
He
not.
just was in the tag team match submission thing that just happened and
Oh
stuff.
yes.
But I'm going to be
What's his
interviewing
lineage?
him tonight at 6 o'clock.
What's his lineage? Where's he from?
I'm going to find out. I believe he's a
Oh,
purple
that's too
belt,
cool. That's
and
too
he's up in
cool. I've
St.
heard of
Peter's.
Keelan. Yeah, I've heard of Keelan. I think he compete against Kenny Beaton different
Yeah,
times.
like
Yeah.
I wouldn't say he's, our age, but anyway, I'll find out. I'm going to interview him later. So, but
Yeah.
okay, real quick, because I know you got to go. Um, Give me like your top martial arts people. Like if you were to go into a museum and you would have a picture of them. Some of the I always use the
I
term.
gotta
No,
say
no, let me
Enzo.
finish. Just
Okay.
like some, it could be anyone. Jigoro Kano, Helio Gracie, like I always use the term your Mount Rushmore of martial arts.
Well, I'd have to. Mufune would have to be there.
Yeah.
Kuzi, I don't know how to say his first name, but when he did Canon of Judo, like
Yes.
he's so yeah, I would say him, Mufune
Yeah.
for sure. I would say Kano, um, Henzo,
Yeah. Oh, Henzo, amazing.
and I'm reading. You got to read Close Guard by Robert Drysdale.
Oh, yes.
It's amazing, man. Like
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
telling
reading
you,
the
like
history, the book that he put out.
yeah, and I'm listening to the audio book, and it's a lot about the history of jiu-jitsu and a lot about Carlson. A lot
Right.
about Carlson. So Carlson has to be there. Shout out to Graham and Pat Lipford for that, and Peter Seamas. Yeah,
Yeah.
Carlson. Because they were talking about it. I'm not trying to say anything, but there was talk where Kitson was getting ready to fight Zulu, and I'm not saying he was getting tapped, but he's having a very hard time with Carlson's purple belts. But
Yeah.
they all trained together at the Figueiredo de Magalhães. This
Right.
was the hub of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I would say also probably Holes as well because he's closer to my lineage,
Yeah.
and that'd be it. But you can't go there without like even like Carlson would joke when John Jacques Bichotto and little Henzo would go by. He's like, "Hey guys, why don't you train over here instead?" But there was a lot of training. Like I mean, there was guys like Tico who and I got to say like God bless you, Hein Gracie. He has to be up there too because Hein was just man like.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
stories that Peter and Kevin told me about Hein being on the mat and their experiences with him and I met
Amazing.
Alf too and it's just crazy man like
That's
these guys.
amazing. And to
Yeah.
realize that we've had, in the province, obviously Carlson Gracie Jr., Hoist Gracie, Hickson Gracie, Henzo Gracie, as far
Euler's
as,
been PEI.
pardon me?
Euler's been in
Hoyler,
PEI.
Hoyler Gracie's been to PEI. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm trying to figure out who else Gracie wise. Obviously, there's been so many world champions come here and visit and stuff. But if
Yeah.
you like martial arts history, especially BJJ history, training under a Gracie is kind of cool, you know?
Yeah. I did one of Igor's classes one time. I did a class of Igor's and I did one of Henzo's classes on a Saturday. No
Wow.
matter where Henzo's at in the world, he'll show up Saturday afternoon at in the blue basement and teach a class, right?
Wow, that's
I learned
amazing.
a really cool Kimura off of him, and I'm gonna try to go over it on Monday just with one of my students to try to review it. But
Right.
yeah,
So okay, so you're heading into the hospital, you're gonna get some stuff done, and then you're getting back to training again, passing on the knowledge, the history, the techniques,
yeah.
and all that stuff. Good for you, man. You're a fantastic person and a phenomenal Budo martial arts guy, and I appreciate all your time.
Thanks, and I'll send you a couple of my matches. I have one with there's a few different matches I have when I competed one time in New Glasgow against I competed against I think three different Fit Plus guys.
Okay.
So I'll send you that. That was kind of when I was in my prime.
Hey, man, you're still in your prime. It's okay.
Oh yes, I got time left. I got time left. And what I was telling Samantha is that once we get going here and we're traveling, like if I'm able to compete somewhere, I probably will, right?
Right.
Because we like to travel too, right? So.
Well, once you're feeling a lot better, we'll have you up to Manimal Athletics for a seminar. So,
Oh, that
yeah.
sounds great. I got a real cool Bravo choke series I'd like to go through with you.
Yeah, as long as you don't mind working with white belts, that's all that
Oh,
matters.
that's all what I'm all about. All I do is work with white belts all day. So
That's perfect. So what I'm going to
that's
do
great for
is
me.
we're going to officially sign off, and then we can chat just for a couple more minutes.
Yep.
I'm going to stop the recording. I want to say, everyone, thank you very much, everyone, for following this, and that's it.
Thanks.
Okay.